It's 1940. A cold wind blows across the Atlantic, carrying a quiet terror. It's not the kind of fear that explodes like a bomb, but one that starves a nation to death. German U-boats are sinking merchant ships faster than Britain can build them. Oil, food, ammunition, medicine, everything the island needs to survive comes by sea. And in the Admiralty war room, one statistic chills the blood of every officer. 300,000 tons of shipping lost every single month. If those numbers keep rising, Britain will collapse without a single German soldier ever stepping foot on its soil. But the Royal Navy has a problem even Churchill can ignore. They have too much ocean and far too few ships. The Navy needs something fast, something cheap, something that can be built anywhere, not just in giant specialized shipyards. And so began the unlikely story of the tiny, ugly warship that saved an empire. Destroyers were the pride of the fleet, sleek, fast, and powerful, but they were also expensive, and each one took a year and a half to build. Britain didn't have 18 months. Convoy losses were skyrocketing. Entire merchant fleets burned on the surface of the Atlantic, their crews lost to the cold, dark water. Back home, families were rationing every meal, every scrap of food, just to survive. The situation was so dire that Churchill later admitted, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." In this moment of pure desperation, the Admiralty needed a miracle. What they got instead was a joke. A naval architect named William Reed walked into the Admiralty with a design so strange, so unorthodox, the officers actually laughed out loud. It wasn't based on a warship. It wasn't fast, it wasn't powerful. It was based on a whaling ship, a small commercial vessel designed to chase whales, not German U. The stats were almost comical. It was slow, it had a short range. It rolled so violently in rough seas that it made even seasoned sailors sick. It was cramped and cheaply built. The admirals scoffed. "You want to send that against the might of the German U-boat fleet?" But William Reed wasn't trying to build the perfect hunter. He was trying to build something Britain could have right now. A ship so simple that even tiny fishing towns and small commercial yards could construct them. And it was that very simplicity that would go on to save thousands of lives. The ship was officially named the Flower-Class Corvette. Each vessel was named after a flower. HMS Violet, HMS Bluebell, Hum's Poppy. Pretty names for ships that were about to sail straight into hell. Construction began almost immediately in small shipyards from Scotland to Canada. Welders and riveters who had never built a warship in their lives suddenly found themselves creating the first line of defense for the entire British Empire. These ships weren't beautiful. They were stubby, functional, and built for one purpose. But they were fast to build, cheap to produce, and surprisingly reliable. Most importantly, they could go where the big, valuable destroyers could not. Within a year, Britain had dozens, then hundreds. A wall of little ships, stretching from Newfoundland to Liverpool, ready to shield the vital convoys. Life aboard a Corvette was pure torture. They were notoriously unstable. In Atlantic storms, the ship would roll up to 40 degrees, sending men and equipment flying. Sailors were constantly seasick, sometimes for days on end. Bunks were always wet, clothes never dried. Seawater would splash down into the engine room, and the whole ship would shudder and groan every time it slammed into a wave. A sailor once famously said, "You didn't live on a Corvette. You survived it." And yet, these men stayed at sea for weeks, sometimes months at a time, escorting slow-moving convoys across the deadliest stretch of water on Earth, day and night. They scanned the waves for the faint trace of a periscope. They listened intently on their hydrophones for the hum of an approaching torpedo. They lived with the constant fear that they might be the next ship to disappear in a flash of fire and smoke. But they never abandoned their duty. Corvettes weren't really designed to be aggressive U-boat killers. Their main job was to deny the enemy the opportunity to attack. By forming a protective screen around the convoys, they forced the U-boats to stay submerged, which drained their batteries and severely limited their ability to aim and fire torpedoes. But when a U-boat was detected, the hunt began. Using a new technology called Aztec sonar, the corvettes could pinpoint a submarine's location. Then came the depth charges, exploding with terrifying force, trying to crush the U-boat's hull. In the hands of skilled and determined captains, these small, unassuming ships became nightmare predators for the German wolfpacks. By the end of 1941, corvettes had destroyed more U-boats than the prestigious British destroyers, not because they were better warships, but because there were simply so many of them. Quantity had become Britain's secret weapon. The Battle of the Atlantic reached its brutal climax in 1943. German wolfpacks began attacking convoys with 20, sometimes 30 submarines at once. They attacked in the dead of night, during raging storms, in seas so cold a man could die in minutes. Yet, the corvettes held the line. During the battle for Convoyance 5, a brutal 5-day ordeal, a small escort group of corvettes and a single destroyer fought non-stop against 43 U. They zigzagged through the wreckage of torpedoed ships, rescued survivors from the flaming oil-slicked water, and all the while, they kept hunting and firing. When the battle finally ended, Germany had lost 7 of its prized U-boats, but Britain had lost something far more important, its fear. This was the turning point. The hunters had become the hunted. By the end of the war, the little ships had built an incredible legacy. Over 294 German U-boats were destroyed, and more than half of those kills were thanks to the involvement of corvettes. They escorted thousands of convoys safely across the Atlantic, protecting the lives of over 500,000 merchant sailors and delivering the supplies that kept Britain in the fight. They were never glamorous, they were never pretty, they were the ugly ducklings of the Royal Navy. But they saved Britain. The Flower-Class Corvettes became a symbol of something the British have always understood. Victory doesn't always come from perfect machines. It comes from imperfect people who simply refuse to quit. The ship that everyone laughed at, the ship that should never have existed, became the ship that saved a nation. Thanks for watching.